It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we have a big hodgepodge episode. We are going to talk about this past weekend's boxing. We are going to talk about NBC Sports Network and what they feel about UFC broadcast rights. We have an update on the antitrust case. We've got stuff on One Championship. It is a smorgasbord of content. But if you want to get all of that content, you have to subscribe, because some of this, the bonus content, is behind a paywall. So get your fingers a walking so that you get all the access to our talking. Oh my God, I'm a poet and didn't know it. John, how the hell are you?
Oh, well, in shock at your rhyme sequences there. It's amazing. You're the rhinoceros.
I am a
hippopotamus.
Oh my goodness. I'm a rhinoceros. That's me.
Yeah, it's like the Flight of the Conchords. I can't remember what the exact terms they used were, but that's, yes, it was good. Good job. A good pitch. Yes, all you lazy, cheap bastards, even though there might be a recession coming, you still should subscribe. It's worth it.
It is worth it. And it's a small subscription too. We don't charge as much as a lot of people. So, And
I should know too, if you notice, I've been writing more and I'm posting articles and I'll have videos and stuff up. And part of the reason is we crossed a certain barrier on subscription. So it now financially makes sense for me to actually put more energy in the site. So the more people that subscribe, the more content you end up getting.
Hey, look at that. So, John, we've got a big show today, but we want to lead off with some important stuff here about the UFC antitrust case settlement. Right now, where does it stand and what's happening?
Well, in the settlement for Lee v. Zuffa, that's the first antitrust lawsuit. There's another one that's still going, Johnson v. Zuffa. Lee v. Zuffa was settled. The judge gave the written settlement approval in March, beginning of March, I think March 4th. There was, as part of the process, the schedule, they had 60 days to confirm or verify everybody's contact information. So hopefully, fighters, if you're listening, you got your contact information verified with the attorneys. If not, do it now. After 60 days, which would have been May 2nd, they start sending out the claim form. So if you've verified your contact information with the plaintiff's attorneys and the people involved with it, they will mail you your claim form, which you have to sign and send back. And you have until June 16th to send that back. So of all 1,115 fighters, I believe, that are part of the class, all but 73, 94%, actually more than 95%, almost 96 to 97% have verified their addresses and should have gotten either a claim form sent to them or will get it soon. If you did not get it, check your spam folder. My understanding is sometimes it goes to spam, so make sure it's not in the spam folder. Sign the form, send it back, and then I think sometime in July, August, before September at the very latest, sometime over the summer, you will get your money. So that's the key information. But again, like I said, there's only 73 fighters have not verified their contact information yet. Those 73 are still eligible. They could contact them. They could get a hold of the attorneys, verify their information, and get a form and sign it. Those names include Brock Lesnar, who stands to make about $3.5 million at least, if he, based on my estimates, if he gets his claim form signed and sent in by June 16th. BJ Penn, probably looking in the neighborhood of $1 million. And then some other well-known fighters, Valentin Shevchenko. She's got, I don't know how much, just a few fights in her early part of her career. And Volkanovski, too, has not sent back his form. I think he had 2 fights in the Lee period. So some well-known fighters, some of them stand to make a lot of money, but the vast majority of fighters have now verified their addresses and should be getting claim forms and hopefully get those signed and sent back in before the deadline, again, June 16th. If you miss the June 16th deadline, guess what? You don't get your money. That money goes into a pool and gets split amongst all the other fighters that sent in their claim forms.
That part is key. So if you're a fighter out there and you have beef with another fighter, get your money so he doesn't get it. See?
Yes. Or convince a bunch of other fighters not to send their forms in. That's a lot of work. I wouldn't do that. That would be mean.
So the one last question on this. The fighters like Volkanovski and Valentina that just have a few fights, they are still going to get several $1,000s off of those few fights, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, I don't know what Volkanovski made. Let's say he made basically the bare minimum in the UFC at the time, 10-10. It might be a little lower than that. So he's looking at 2 wins. I don't know what his record was. Let's say he had 2 wins, 30,000. He would be looking at $35,000 to $40,000 in that range for part of his settlement claim. Now, for a guy what he makes now, that's probably not much, but still $35,000 to $40,000. It's
free money.
More than it's free money. And now I have a theory. If you look at the names on the list, some of them are international fighters. They might be the few that are not aware of this. I am doubtful, very doubtful, that Brock Lesnar has not been informed of this. I'm very doubtful BJ Penn has not been informed of this. If you've seen BJ Penn, some of the social media videos and stuff with him and stuff he's posted, unfortunately, BJ Penn seems to be the grips of paranoia, maybe schizophrenia. I don't want to, I'm not a doctor, but I personally experienced someone that had this and it did not end up well. He has the signs of someone that's under delusions, some sort of paranoid delusions. And I can only guess, but I imagine that it's a very strong possibility he looks at whatever this money, whatever offer is part of the paranoid delusion, that he is not accepting it, not getting his information verified because he's paranoid about something. I think that's a strong possibility. Other fighters that are like current UFC, the few current UFC stars that haven't collected, like Volkanovski, Valentina, I'm just guessing because we've heard a lot of fighters. I'm aware of several fighters that are paranoid about collecting the money. I'm just going to guess that they're a little paranoid and they're big stars and they look at why take the risk for such a small amount of money. That's what I'm going to guess is going on with those two. For the rest of the fighters, several might not just be aware of it, or who knows where they are in their life, or some of these fighters I don't even recognize their names. So, but it's down to a small amount. But I will put it in the article notes, not the podcast notes on the Substack. And if you know any of those fighters and you want to get a hold of them, say, hey, go get your claim form in before the deadline, June 16th. I would suggest you do that because that'd be a nice thing for someone that might very well need the money badly.
Indeed. All right. So let's get to the weekend's boxing because we had a lot of boxing over a few cards this weekend. 2 cards were linked and it was called the Fatal Fury boxing event. Now that was put on by Turki Al-Sheikh, aka The Ring. What did you think of that 2-day event? And where do you think the biggest problems were with that event?
Well, number one, biggest problem, and also this goes hand in hand, what I think of the event was they were terrible fights all across both events. It was from a fight fan point of view, from someone watching the fights, on one of the worst experiences of my life, worst weekends of my life of watching fights, unbearable fights. So that's the biggest problem, terrible fights. And what I think of the event, it was 2-day events full of terrible fights. In fact, here's a stat that's just insane. The first night in Times Square, 2 fights on that night were in the 5, since they went to 12-round bouts and started keeping track of CompuBox. They were 2 of the bottom 5 lowest punches thrown in a 12-round fight that CompuBox has records for. So we're going back, I think, 40 years for that. 2 of the lowest 5. And thankfully for Haney versus Ramirez, that dropped out of the bottom 5, the 5 worst, only because the next night Canelo versus School was the worst in the terms of throwing punches. Worst fight ever, least amount of punches thrown ever, and pushed Haney Ramirez out of the bottom 5 to number 6. So 3 of the lowest punch counts thrown in a 12-round fight happened over the weekend in those 2 nights. And even then, I thought, you look at the other big fight of the night, Teofimo Lopez. I didn't find he put on a little bit of show, but it wasn't entertaining at all. There was no risk being taken. So it was a dreadful night of fights. I guess let's get the other problem, but I want to focus on how terrible those fights were. So did you find anything enjoyable?
No, I didn't. I mean, I was happy to see Ryan Garcia get beat.
Yeah, I have never been. I was getting angry at the screen. I know people watch The Simpsons. I'm an old Simpsons fan, the classic Simpsons. And there's a scene where Milhouse and Bart are watching I guess a video clip of Itchy and Scratchy, and they're waiting them to get to the fireworks factory. And Milhouse freaks out. When are they going to get to the fireworks factory? That was me. When are they going to get to fighting? I was losing my mind over those 2 dates. That was the worst experience possible. And here's something that's crazy. Of those 5 of those 6 lowest punches thrown fights we've had in a 12-round fight, 5 of them have taken place in the last 18 months. The previous one was 2007. So you've got 1 in 2007 and then 5 the next 6 in the last 18 months. And here's the other one. I don't know if this has anything to do with it. I don't want to. It's, the causation, correlation problem here. But it is interesting that all 5 of those fights that had the lowest punches thrown in the last in the last 18 months were all on DAZN. So that's kind of a problem. It's, we've had, and I can't say it's all of them because we've had some great fights with them. We've had Usyk versus Fury, where both of them were great fights. So it was Beterbiev versus Bivol. But at the same time, you guys are producing tons of stinkers and just dreadful fights. Now, besides that, the other problems, I'd guess, would be the location. The locations were the next problem behind the fights. But the fights by far were the biggest problem. I think we would have forgiven the other stuff if we had entertaining fights.
Let's talk about the location, though, especially the Times Square one, because there were problems cropping up even from the last few weeks. Because remember, these cards were supposed to be free, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. And
then it went from free to $20 or $25, and then it went from that to what it turned into, which was $69 per or $89 if you bought both.
Yeah, I don't. I think the whole thing was poorly orchestrated, poorly thought out. I got to give him a pass on something. Thomas Hauser wrote a piece for The Guardian about the problems they had with the Times Square location. How the original plan was to kind of keep it open to the public, but because they thought it caused such a crunch in numbers that there'd be so many people there, that the police basically forced them to put up a barrier and block it, which kind of ruined the whole thing. And I feel a little bit for them, but at the same time, I'm wondering, did you guys do any research? Did you get any specific, agreements? And if that's the case, if you knew Times Square, or you had a feeling that Times Square was going to be a problem, I'm shocked they didn't move the fights to Central Park. It gives you the same thing. Central Park is an iconic location. We had the concert in Central Park. We've had massive events take place there, and you could feel, have a large crowd and have the skyscrapers behind you. So that would kind of work. So that's one. Is I'm a little forgiving about the Times Square part because it sounds like they're caught off guard about what the NYPD required of them. At the same time, you'd hope they would have done the research more, but that defeats it because it was supposed to be a free fight for the fans, kind of, and that would have been part of the appeal. The other problem is, okay, it's not free for the fans; it's on pay-per-view. Well, no one's there. No one. I've had people on Twitter kind of pushing back, like, "Oh, this was a great bout. It got all this free press." I know a lot of boxing fans. Well, let me take that back. Let me rephrase that. I don't know any real fight fans in my life that are true hardcore, but I know a lot of people that are kind of casual fight fans. That's how I gauge when something's going to get big. When someone asks me, when I can tell that they ask me about Jake Paul or something, or they ask me about Garcia versus, Haney, or Garcia versus Tank Davis. That I knew those fights were crossing into mainstream because several people that are casual. No one was aware of these fights that I know of.
Yeah.
There was just just no public awareness. You put them on pay-per-view on DAZN, which just has a microscopic footprint. So you're not getting the public to be more aware. They're not pay-per-view fights. I don't know how many pay-per-views you're going to sell for this, because these are not pay-per-view caliber fights to begin with. They're just big name, they're a roster of big name fighters. And I think it was, in some ways, originally when I heard about it, I think it's genius. You're going to have Times Square with hopefully a live audience. Put it on somewhere that you could, a wide mass could see it. Maybe Netflix could have been a possibility. If not, YouTube would have been better. Or, offer it to ESPN, somewhere that huge numbers of people could see it for very little, you might not make any money and you might lose a bunch, but you want to get as many people as possible see it. You can advertise Canelo and your whole Boxing Ring magazine there, but instead you put it on pay-per-view, and that's the number of people that are going to see this are very minimum. Even on the YouTube rewatch, it's not going to get the impressions that you get. It's just going to appeal to people that are already in the boxing bubble. So I think that was a big problem. And then the other problem is you go to the next night, I'm sure we'll go revisit Times Square for a bit, but I'm just going to talk quickly about the next night. The next night you go to Saudi Arabia for Cinco de Mayo weekend, where I don't know if there's a single Mexican person in the audience. In the ring, yes, but I'm not sure in the audience. The audience was dead leading up to the main event. Dead for the main event, but it was empty until the main event. The broadcast time was an insane, like 6 a.m. So maybe that's part of the problem. And then again, you had one of the all-time stinker fights. I don't know why he should never even be holding the belt. And this was crazy too. Another crazy stat. Canelo won round 1 and he didn't connect with one punch. This is almost Willie Pep territory here. He wins without connecting on one punch, and only wins because School is backtracking so much, doing his Dominique Cruz without throwing many punches imitation, and just giving an all-time awful performance. So that's the other location. You have Cinco de Mayo weekend and you put them in Saudi Arabia, which just seems like another mistake. We can talk about how the Saudis are doing all this stuff for boxing, and they're helping all the boxers, they're making it big. But again, I'm not detecting any crossover. They're putting on these events that should strike a chord with the public, just like when Ngannou fought Fury or Joshua. There's all when with Usyk Fury, they should strike a chord with the public, and yet we're missing a lot of that because they're just not crossing over from that zone bubble.
I got a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding the promotion of this weekend, let's compare it to the promotion of Usyk Fury or Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury, because the way that those fights were promoted by the Saudis was incredible. They got little mini movies as promotional property. You know what I mean? They got everyone invested, despite the fact that those fights were overseas. But I did not get any feeling of massive promotion for either one of these cards at all. It felt like all of the promotion was being built around all their faux pas. Everything that they were doing wrong was the promotion that they were getting, but we didn't get weeks and weeks, months of buildup like we've gotten in the past, especially for Canelo fights. We had a Canelo fight, a Cinco de Mayo fight. So what are your thoughts on that, on the seeming pulling back of the reins for a massive promotional push like they've done before?
Well, they make those movies that get a lot of slight interest. I think they're overdone. I know other people love them, and I think they're just all they're interesting, but they're just slightly overdone. Like you cut them in half, and they would be more effective. That's just me personally. I'm less is more guy sometimes. But they did those movies. And they got attention. Like again, you go back to Fury, Usyk. I know there was interest in the boxing world, a little bit of crossover, and I know there's a lot of people I know that were talking about Ngannou versus Fury and Ngannou versus Joshua. What killed it, though, is the talk is that was on DAZN, and no one knows where that is or how to watch it. So they're just, when they find out afterwards, they want to know the results. And for Joshua, they put it on not only on DAZN, but a Friday during the day. Mm-hmm. And I remember that just going by people, like they were shocked that the fight already took place, that they were looking forward to it. And that was a fight they're interested to do, but they're not going to go out of their way to find DAZN on a Friday afternoon. And those seem like massive mistakes to not make it easier to get people to see it. I understand it's, you're trying to push the zone, but that's going to be a hard hurdle. But the Friday afternoon, especially if no one's going to buy into zone, I still don't know why they couldn't have got Joshua Ngannou, especially on a different platform or basically offered for free on DAZN, just to get people to subscribe to DAZN, because you're not going to sell many pay-per-views. But in this case, the marketing attempt was you were going to create something viral by putting them in Times Square, getting tons of coverage of this massive crowd. I think this was the original plan. They're going to draw 10, 20,000 people in Times Square, and you would have basically got a lot of attention because people are like, what's going on in Times Square? There's live boxing. And that part might have worked if you got a large crowd, but it really would have worked better if you had a large crowd and it was somewhere easy for everybody else to tune in for free, right? And then you would have probably drawn millions of eyeballs to this event instead of people just like, oh, there's this thing going on in Times Square where they have this red curtain surrounding it, no one can see what's going on. Okay. We kind of robbed the virality that you could have got if you could have had a public boxing event that draws a massive audience, and especially if people could tune in easily to see what everybody else was talking about.
Okay, going to this question's going to be hand in hand with your making it easy for people to view. You said people were, anxious to see the Ngannou Joshua fight, but it was on a Friday, it was early, blah, blah, blah. And people were shocked by that. But what you said made sense there in that they promoted it enough to make people want to see it. I didn't get that feeling from this weekend's fights. Yes, they had the idea to put it in Times Square and it was going to be amazing, but I didn't feel like they promoted it up to this point. I don't feel like they did the legwork the way that they normally do, is what I'm saying. It's like nobody really knew anything about this until the weekend of. It felt like a lot of people were just finding out that there were fights, that they were going to be in Times Square. I mean, hardly anybody knew Canelo was fighting too. I mean, it was crazy.
We'll get to Canelo in a second. That's great. But no, I agree with you. But part of it was, I think that was kind of their strategy. We're not going to promote it because we're not selling tickets. It was going to be a live free event. I think the original plan was we are going to hold this event. Hardcore fans will be aware of it, but the public, that's as soon as the media picks up, maybe 3 days before that, there's going to be this massive crowd to watch a live boxing event in Times Square. We're going to get a ton of free press. I think that's their thinking. I think that's what they were thinking. And unfortunately for them, and maybe they should have saw this, is that when you put a big red box over it required, the press no longer is going to put they're not going to put the world's eyeballs on what's going on there. And again, the other problem is, okay, you don't have the audience that's showing up Times Square to get all this attention. You also didn't have it so everybody could tune in to see the event somewhere. You had to go to pay-per-view. Now,
yes.
Canelo, the other problem, it is interesting because Hispanic Mexican Canelo fans, Mexican American, they were aware of this fight, I think, much more than the general public. My other friends, I know a few people that in California, boxing fans of Mexican heritage, or at least Latin American. I think one of them was actually Guatemalan, but they're Canelo fans. They were aware of this fight. But that just, that shows the reach of Canelo more than anything. But I don't know how much interest there was. It wasn't, again, there's no live audience, and there was no promotion to everybody but diehard. I think maybe they count on diehard Canelo fans themselves to find it. But I don't know what the attraction was. I'll be interested to see what the pay-per-view sales are, because I got a feeling it'll be terrible, because I'm not sure what Canelo fans are going to be. I guess there's some, the hardcore Canelo fans will probably have watched it, but for Canelo, the big numbers are usually when you start bringing in the casuals and stuff, and the not so hardcore fans. And I don't see how that's going to have been possible in this case. That the School was such an uninteresting pick. No one gave him a chance. No one had any interest in him. And then you throw it out of the country. And we've talked about before, when you do events in the United States or in UK for their market, but the media shows up and they cover it, and you get so much more spillover free media coverage. You get almost no media coverage, that extra media coverage, when you put it in Saudi Arabia. So all that works against it. So, again, it's, we're just listing off more and more problems, but they had a bunch.
And final question before I move on to the next one. The loss of HBO and Showtime, we're feeling it, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we are definitely, they had machines at some point of promoting. They didn't hand over the keys to particular promoters, so they had some quality control there. And the other thing good, we forget, I mean, HBO, they had their favorites and Showtime too, but they generally, they kept their broadcast teams a little bit arm's length away from the promoters. And so they had to be honest about the promotion, about the events. I mean, HBO famously would, shit talk their own boxing matches if they were bad. And here you got, we have the media. I'm going to talk about the media's coverage of this event. The media that works with them, there was a lot of praise from them. I don't know if they were as honest as they could have been about how terrible these events were going. They were, I saw, people like posting about how amazing this Times Square event. And I'm like, it sounds amazing, but the end result was not amazing. You guys, I think you had a narrative you wanted to run with because you're trying to get on the good side of Ring Magazine because they're throwing money around left and right. And then, the worst thing, we didn't even bring up the worst thing of the weekend, not real media, but I guess there's a wrestler called Booker T.
Yes.
And he had a planted question for Turki Al-Sheikh that was so craven. So manipulative about talking about how great he is and the Ali Act is there to protect the fighters, but you're there to even do more protections for them.
Oh my God.
And so, that's the type of media that they're looking to nurture, I guess, the type of coverage they want. I don't want to be, I guess it sounds super negative, but I don't think the idea of having a Times Square bout, in hindsight, yes, it's a terrible idea. But going into it, I didn't think it was a terrible idea. I thought it was kind of smart until everything started not unfolding the way I expected it to unfold. I thought originally it would be in front of a live audience. When that's not the case, well, that's terrible. And I thought it would be put in front as cheaply as possible, in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And that didn't happen when they put on pay-per-view. And you add that together, ends up for a terrible night. And we got to start. Also, the other thing too, I got a question is because, I brought up earlier, 5 of the last 6 events have of least thrown punches have been in the last 18 months, all involving DAZN, many of them involving the Saudis. There was a whole discussion about fighter pay, that I saw on Twitter that, maybe the fighters are getting paid too much. And that's why these fights are terrible. And I don't think that's it because, Usyk and Fury were the 2 highest paid fighters and they put on great fights. But I do think there's something about perhaps the people that they're signing or the way that the contract agreements are signed. Basically, guys know that they have a big fight already in place. If they win, that makes people very hesitant to take any risks. And that could be part of the problem because a lot of these fights, these were showcase fights, but apparently, Garcia and Haney already had a big contract for their next fight. Well, I think you kind of incentivized both of them not to take any risk at all. What's the point of putting on a performance if the next fight is already lined up and already signed?
Yeah. I would have put the rematch on that card rather than set them up with other people because you gave them both a chance to look either look really bad like Haney did or to lose like Brian did.
Well, if you're going to do an event in Times Square for free for the public, then you can't have Haney versus Garcia for that because probably the cost would be too high because you're going to pay him a lot. So you have to give him lesser opponents. But in that case, I don't know. Maybe you should have just ran the rematch back right away. Mm-hmm. Hindsight's 2020, but there's just a bunch of issues with a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of problems to be spread around.
And not to mention my personal all-time pet peeve of having to pay DAZN $29.99 and then have to buy the pay-per-view on top of that. That's ridiculous. When we had HBO and Showtime, that was part of your cable package, and no single channel was costing $30 a month.
You still have to pay separately for the pay-per-views for HBO.
Sure, but the point I'm making is you weren't paying another out-of-pocket fee. The $29.99. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And that is my personal pet peeve. I hate having a paywall to actually get to the pay-per-view. That's crazy to me. All right, so we are going to move on to the next question finally, and that is, during the event, it was announced that TKO Boxing would be promoting Canelo Bud Crawford, and that Dana White would be the promoter of record. What are your thoughts on that? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!